Amazon's spending about $4 to get a package to the customer. And these people in general, the market is spending 10. That's what you need to solve. You can't be spending 2.5 times what other people are spending.
This is the final recording of the year. We're recording this on the 22nd and we're heading into the holidays. Aaron, welcome to the Fort Podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Why don't we just get started with kind of how you got started with ShipHero and came up with this idea that you've been working on now for almost 10 years.
Yeah, sure. So it's my second business. My first business I started in college, just accidentally sort of. And it was an e-commerce business. So there was a bunch of things I was frustrated about running that business. I was like, hey, I can do this better. And I was a programmer. So programming since I was a little kid. So I was like, I'm just going to start on this, nights and weekends, hacked something together, got our first customer after about a year. And I just kept running with it until this became my full-time business.
And in your notes, before we jump into that, I have to ask, we ask everybody always 3 facts, and your second fact was, I nearly went bankrupt in 2008. Can you expand on that?
If I have to. Yeah. I mean, all the shit that can go wrong went wrong. So I started the business with a family friend in college. I was in college. He was 10 years older. And it was just, I made all my money, like just hustling online since I was a kid. So I thought this was just a way to make a couple extra bucks. It took off. I never had access to the financials. I never had access to the books. I just sort of I was the tech and marketing and he was like the business side, whatever that meant, right? I was a programmer. I never got into that. And we went from thinking we had a pretty good, profitable business to one of the worst days of my life was my mom, she died of cancer about 14, 15 years ago at this point. So she was in the hospital, right at a couple of weeks left at that point. And my whole family, me, my brother, and my dad were rotating. So we were there 24 hours a day. So we'd work and then be there overnight and whatever. It was obviously, it was difficult. It was all kind of a blur. My business partner is there's some issues. Could you meet at our accountant's office? I never met our accountant. Our accountant was my business partner's friend. He's like, can we meet at his office in the city? I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. My mom was in the hospital in New York City. I lived in the suburbs. So I'm like, all right, I'll just go to this meeting and then I'll go to the hospital because I was supposed to be in the hospital that night. So I go there and all I remember is them basically saying hey, this is what we thought the business did. We thought we had this much cash and we made this much profit last year. But in reality, we lost money and we actually don't have cash. We owe all this money. And
oh my God,
we're going to go bankrupt. I literally don't remember anything from that till the next morning, leaving the hospital, that whole, I don't know, 12 hours, whatever. It's just a blur. I just don't even remember. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember the rest of the meeting. I don't remember anything. So basically never figured out quite what happened, but the accounting was wrong. So, later that year, and that was the reason why I can't, that saying, hey, you see, got the Buffett saying, but sort of you see who's naked when the tide goes out or whatever, right? So it was in 2008 when the financial crisis hit because we were selling apparel for martial arts, which is for kids taking karate basically at the time. And that market just died because that's the first thing you cut, right? You cut your kids' karate lessons, it's not a necessity. So our revenue went down. And that's when it sort of revealed that, hey, all these numbers were sort of fake. So anyways, I ended up buying them out because my dad, who's a college professor, didn't have a lot of money, but his house was paid for. So he mortgaged his house. I took that money, paid off the debts that we had as much as we can, ended up paying everyone in full, didn't default on any loans, but, just barely eked it out for a few years and eventually turned it around. Got the business back to the point where it was really making, north of $1 million a year. But when I say we were close to bankruptcy, I would wake up every morning like full of anxiety and just check the bank account to be like, did we bounce anything? Like we were so close to zero every day. Like we were like bouncing off that zero until we, eventually rebuilt it. But
that is a sickening, just waking up every day. It's like you have 5 seconds of not thinking about it. And then all of a sudden the thought hits you. You're like, damn it, here we go.
I just could be on my computer like before I did anything, like I'd get up and just check the bank balance and like, is it negative?
So the lessons learned are obviously better accounting or more oversight of accounting. Is that fair? Or like, was there anything that you kind of said, like, we could have done this better and it wouldn't have been such a surprise? Or
well, I just trusted someone entirely with the accounting and we're like, oh, he's got it, right? And I didn't even stick my nose in it. And, obviously in hindsight, like you gotta know what's going on with the numbers. Like you just can't just trust someone.
Was there anything you did differently that you weren't doing before to turn around the business? Like, was there a new skill that you learned through all that is why you're able to turn it back to $1 million a year?
So we basically reinvented the whole business. We switched from selling karate equipment to selling equipment for a martial art called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that was just taken off at the time. It was really out of necessity because we had no money for inventory. So we switched to like a deal a day model because I couldn't afford to stock 1,000 SKUs. So I was like, I'm going to stock 7 and sell 1 item a day, which worked really well and is still the primary business model of that business today, 14 years later. But it was really like just a desperation Hail Mary because we just didn't have the money to buy inventory.
Yep. So was this the impetus for the idea to start ShipHero? And can you explain a little bit about what ShipHero is, maybe when you started and what it is today?
Yeah, no. So by the time I started ShipHero, that company was, well back on its feet, making good money. And it was sort of just a traditional e-commerce business at that point. So ShipHero, we started as warehouse management software. So basically, whether you're a brand that ships your own product or you're a third-party logistics company shipping for other people, you need technology to run the warehouse, generate the labels, all that stuff. So we still do that today. We serve about $8 billion a year of orders. $8 billion a year worth of orders are shipped through our system. More than 1 out of every 200 packages in the U.S., including Amazon, in that pool of packages ships using our software. So we built it. We got some customers shipping, as much as 250,000 packages a week. We've got some pretty good scale customers, and we're just the software running in those buildings. That's how we started. About 3 years ago, we also started opening our own facilities. So we've got 9 facilities across the US and Canada where we just ship for people who want to outsource to us. It's a smaller business. It's about $800 million a year of GMV. We're serving about $800 million of customer orders a year. It's about 10% of the size of our software business.
Is there a size where you're you shouldn't actually be shipping your own product, even though they probably are? Like, is there a size where you're too small, or like, what is the size that you should start bringing shipping in-house and not using your facility? I don't know if I'm asking that the right way.
Well, you see, usually it just pays to start shipping your own when you're really small. And then when you get to, $1 million or so a year in revenue, it pays to start to outsource it because you can't ship it yourself. You got to start getting a warehouse and hiring a team. And it's just not worth it. You'll end up spending more money unless you have some sort of customized product. But, everyone thinks they do. Most people's products are pretty generic. At the end of the day, it goes in a box and gets shipped. And then it doesn't become worth bringing it back in-house until you're pretty decent scale. So like Solo Brands, one of our customers, they're a small public company. I think they have like 1 million square feet across a bunch of different facilities. Like at that scale, the economics of bringing it back in-house can make sense if you want to run it. But in between that, $1 and a couple $100 million in annual revenue, outsourcing it, while far from perfect, is way better than running it in-house. And I've done both.
And you said that you guys ship for Amazon. Did I hear that right?
No. What I'm saying is when you look at all the packages shipped in the US, we have more than 1 out of every 200. So basically, like, Amazon has 100 out of the 200. And in that remaining 100, we get like 1 of them. So No, we don't ship for Amazon.
I had this very generic question that you can take a lot of ways. And it said, when I say Amazon, what does that make you think about from your view of the world? Are they a big competitor of yours? Do you not think about them? Are they like, how do you think about them in relation to what you do every day?
They're certainly a competitor, but they're so much bigger we don't think of them sort of that way. I think actually the most surprising thing about Amazon is I'll pull this to Twitter for a second. A couple of people posted today complaining, and today's December 22nd, complaining that their listings on Amazon are showing delivery after Christmas. And they were like ragging on Amazon. And I'm like, do you know how hard it is to get something delivered when you order today before Christmas and there's storms coming across the United States? And like, it's just funny how they're so good at what they do, yet it's never enough. You know what I mean? So just a little, but Amazon's the best in the world at what they do. A lot of what we do is honestly just following them. Like they've trailblazed. They're way ahead of everyone else. I think people follow them in the wrong way. So like, oh, we also have to deliver in 2 days or 1 day. I'm like, no, it's actually not the reality. But what they do is they deliver for cheaper than anyone else in the world. And that's a good goal. So if it takes 3 days instead of 2, that's fine. But if you're spending, let's put it this way, Amazon's spending about $4 to get a package to the customer. And these people in general, the market is spending 10. That's what you need to solve. You can't be spending 2.5 times what other people are spending. So, we try to close that gap, and fortunately, we can copy what they do, and it's a lot of what we do, frankly.
Have they just made it harder for small businesses and folks that can't get that cost? Like, or have you found that customers don't really care if it arrives next day or even 2 days? Like, they're cool with the 3 or 4 day delivery, or have they kind of reset everybody's expectations? I mean, you just mentioned the Christmas thing.
The 2-day thing has as much fooled people as actually impacted things. I think it's caused a lot of big companies to chase 2-day when they shouldn't be. But there's a reason why they're almost 50% of the market for e-commerce, right? Like, people like the convenience and they like the fast free shipping. Like, Amazon's not stupid, right? They might not make a lot of money on that business, but they've sure made sure no one else does either.
When you say you copy them, like, how do you copy them? I'm assuming you just obviously are watching what they're doing, but as far as the little nuts and bolts that nobody actually sees, like, how do you get a good view into what you need to be doing based on what they're doing? Are there things that are obvious, like hiding in plain sight, that you watch for? Is it certain data? Like, how do you copy them?
So I would copy them in a couple of very, very specific ways. And I think people, again, are, for the most part, copying the wrong thing. So people think, hey, Amazon's got all these robots. I got to have all these robots. And we have some robots in our warehouses. Amazon doesn't actually use robots for many of their buildings. That's not what you should be copying. The main advantage so the way that our business works, the way being a 3PL works, is 70% of the cost happens outside of your building. It goes to UPS or FedEx. That's 70%. So if you're spending all your time worrying about what happens inside the building, the maximum you can reduce it is like 29%, right? If you took all your costs and reduced it by 99%, you're actually only reducing 29% of the total cost, right? You need to reduce that 70%. And how do you not pay UPS and FedEx so much money? The model of what we do in our buildings, and it's fairly obvious once you see it, is we tell our customers, ship all your products to one warehouse, let's say our warehouse in Las Vegas, and we take that product, we put it on trucks, we ship it to a bunch of other warehouses. When someone orders in Dallas or Fort Worth, we ship it via local carrier because we have the product sitting in Fort Worth. We ship it via a local carrier who delivers it the next day. Exactly what Amazon did, right? It's a very simple model. It's very hard to execute, but conceptually fairly simple. And the cost savings there dwarf the entire amount spent in the warehouse. So you can save more by just shipping it via local carrier in Fort Worth than the entire cost of picking and packing an order in your warehouse. You just got to make sure you have the product in the right place at the right time. Again, easier said than done, But like, that is the answer. There is no like, oh, I'm going to make my warehouse perfectly efficient. It doesn't matter. I still win on price because I'm not paying UPS $7 to deliver. I have a local carrier who's delivering it for $4. So you can't cover that $3. There's no way to make up that $3 in the warehouse because the entire warehouse bill is $2.
Yeah. Interesting. Is there like the best product you could ever ship that's like the right size, right weight, like, or there's products that are just terrible to ship for the customer? Like, is there a perfect product out there, or it just varies and depends how much you charge?
It varies based on the type of customer. So for me, I need to be able to get the product close to the end customer, which means an apparel customer that has, on the average order is like 4 different shirts and they've got like every color and every size and everything like that. They're not going to give me enough stock to be able to distribute that across 5 warehouses. Like they're only going to send me like 8 extra large green, right? So how am I going to split that between all the warehouses? Like it just doesn't work well for me. So for me, better is a customer that has a relatively small number of SKUs so that I could get it in all my buildings. Now, for other people, they would prefer the different profile, like apparel. For us, it's not great. So like one of our biggest customers is a brand called Momofuku, which is a restaurant, but they also sell food online. And they only like just sell tons of them. And but there's only like 35 different SKUs, right? There's like this type of spicy noodles or that. There's only a limited number, and they're big and heavy, which is also good because UPS charges a ton to ship big and heavy stuff. My local carriers like doesn't cost me that much more, heavy versus light. So that's a good profile for me. But different 3PLs like different things.
Okay, so if I order like a t-shirt that's made in LA, and you are working with that apparel company, and I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, how does that product get to me?
So the old model would be they would have a warehouse right next to their factory, and whether you were in New York or Fort Worth or Miami, it would ship from that factory, from that warehouse near that factory. And if they wanted to get it to you quick, they'd put it on a plane. It would go UPS second day air. And if they didn't care, and it'll get there in 2 days, but it would cost them like $18. And if they didn't care about the speed, they'd give it to like DHL e-commerce. It would cost them, $6, but it would take 5 days or more. Those are the 2 options. So what we do is we take it, we move it, and it would probably be sitting in the warehouse in Fort Worth, and you would get it the next day. If you're San Antonio, we can get it the next day. Houston, we can get it the next day. If you're further out and you're not in a major metro, it'll probably take 2 days, and it'll cost me less than $5 to get it to.
Is there like a common mistake that maybe startup e-commerce or first-time e-commerce companies or just in general make when they're thinking about how they ship product and warehouse product? Like, is there something that is like an easy fastball for if somebody's listening to this that they could better their business if they stopped doing this and did this instead?
Yeah, the most common mistake is someone says, my product comes in to the port of LA. I don't want to pay to ship it into Kansas City or somewhere, right? So I'm just going to stock it the closest to the port I can because that saves me my inbound freight. What they don't realize is they're spending 8 times as much on the outbound freight as they are on the inbound freight. But it's harder to see, right? Because it's a million little transactions versus the inbound's one big transaction. So people say, it's called drayage, that freight from the port to the warehouse. And they're like, man, the drayage is an extra $3,000. So I ship it all the way to Kansas City. Like, I can't do that. But they don't realize they're paying an extra $2 on every shipment going out UPS. And in fact, they're spending an extra $23,000 shipping it there. And like, I mean, I've had this conversation directly with people and they still don't get it. So people won't believe me because people see the big number and the small number on every bill is harder to notice. But that's the reality. You want to be close to the end customer, not the port.
You want to be closer to the end customer, not the port. And their logic and thinking is if they're closer to remind me again, why does it seem obvious that you want to be closer to the port?
So the way you pay for inbound is you pay for the cost of the container moving from China to LA, right? Which nowadays it's not that expensive. It's, let's say $3,000, right? Then you pay the inland freight or the drayage, which is the cost of moving that container from the port to the warehouse. So if that warehouse is in the Inland Empire, it'd be less than $500. If that warehouse is somewhere in the middle of the country, it will be a few $1,000s, right? So it looks like it's more expensive to move. It is more expensive to move it there, but then when you're shipping to New York, you're spending half as much because it's already halfway there, right? It's always cheaper to move something in bulk than individual units, but people don't see it because no one wants to read their UPS bill because it's 1,000,000 pages long and they fall asleep, But
is it cheaper to ship something to a big city with a lot of infrastructure as opposed to like a rural city in like the middle of nowhere, Montana?
So like everything in logistics, it depends. So you got to be smart with your carrier mix. So there's UPS and FedEx will charge you an additional $13 to get to that little town in Montana per package. So if the list rate to ship it is $8, they'll charge you a residential surcharge, a super residential surcharge, and then a remote area surcharge. So the remote area surcharge is $13, and those other surcharges are like $2 and $3 or something like that. Like you end up paying way more than you would think to get it out there. But if you ship that same package USPS, while the base rate might be higher, there are zero surcharges. So you need to look at every package in real time and make a different decision. So there's no one in the world who could ever figure it out because there's all these zip codes and it just different carriers treat them differently. So if you're not being smart and saying, well, this package UPS going to charge me extra, I'll go USPS. And this package, UPS is cheaper or faster. Like you have to analyze each one. And our WMS does that. Like it's just built in. So it just automatically does it.
It automatically picks the right carrier.
Yeah, you just say I want it. If you use our software, you just say I want this package to get there the cheapest way possible that gets you in X amount of days, and then we in advance look up based on what we think the weight is going to be all the options, and we make a decision as to which method to use.
If you're a apparel company, are you just kind of hoping that most of your orders obviously are going to big cities? Like you're just hoping that you're not getting a onesie here in like the middle of nowhere, Iowa, then one to Montana. Like, is your model assuming that 90% of product is going to a major hub that's easier to get to, or do you really care one way or the other?
I think most brands are not nearly sophisticated enough to know. And frankly, everyone hates logistics and they don't want to spend any time thinking about it. So they just pray. They just cover their eyes. Half the people who have these mid-sized e-commerce brands, if you ask them two simple questions: how much does it cost you on average per package, and how long does it take to get there on average? They cannot answer. What they'll say is, oh, DHL charges me $6. And you say, but if you shipped 1,000 packages last week, was your bill $6,000? And they'll have no idea. And then they'll look at it and they'll be like, oh, actually it's 8,000. If you can convince them to look, because they don't understand what their bills are, because they're assuming that every package is going from LA to San Francisco. Oh, that's only $6, not realizing that, well, if it's going from LA to rural Montana, that's actually $18, and they didn't factor that in, right? So no one knows because no one spends the time to look.
I was looking at the ways that you guys make things cheaper for your customers, and one of the things that it said, y'all do 3 times picking efficiency. Did I say that right?
Yeah, our software is really good at
what does that mean?
People. So we have a bunch of videos. If you go on YouTube, you can see how we pick and pack orders, but we're pretty good at getting orders picked and packed well. So we tell people they should be spending less than $1.50 all in on labor to ship an average order, which is significantly less than what you would get on a sort of older school system. So we do that. We have mobile apps. You scan items, they batch them, they group them intelligently, so you reduce your walk. And we have a bunch of other tools to make the picking and packing process quicker. And then we also have a ton of videos because we do run our own buildings that are really pretty big scale buildings. And we do a lot of videos for just process improvement. Here's the ideal flow. Actually, I'm going to do a bunch of new ones in January because we came up with a couple of tweaks to our systems. But Yeah, we give people both the software and the flows to use in their own warehouse. And you can use the flows in other software as well, obviously. You can still watch the videos and learn from them. But we try to help people drive that cost down. And I think we're pretty good at it.
Drones. Delivering packages by drone.
Yeah, it's not here yet.
It's not here yet. Every time I see it like an infomercial, I just imagine either like BB guns coming out and you're popping drones out of the sky, or I see it as like a huge mess. Am I missing anything? Like, is this really going to happen where we've got drones delivering packages? You look up in the sky and there's just Amazon boxes and ShipHero boxes everywhere. Like, how does this play out?
I hope so. It's not going to happen this decade. Like, no, there's a bunch of intermediate ways to make it happen that I think are actually really helpful, depending on the environment. So, in big cities, it's not necessary. It's not even possible, right? But sort of rural communities, you think of the idea of a truck showing up to a neighborhood and then like a bunch of drones dispatching, and just instead of going to everyone's door, it just flies it there, right? And does 8 at a time or something. Like, it's not so far. You can keep even line of sight probably. So I think drones will be part of a future in 10 years from now. It's just, we're very far. The tech like keeps failing, and it's a hard problem to solve and very dangerous when it fails.
Or the little robots that are just going down the sidewalk, like little,
they have those
little ET.
Yeah, those are live in some cities, and they're doing some, but these are very marginal, like very small percentage, and you got to go down and meet them. It's like, do you really want to go out and meet your delivery drone? No, you just want UPS to leave it on your front porch and you'll get it later, right? Like, so.
Yeah, I feel like some of it's unnecessary. I mean, I feel like this is going to be the next Lime scooters or Bird scooters, whatever. They just end up, in over a bridge in the water eventually. But we'll see.
I don't think so, because the ROI is pretty easy to tell, right? I don't feel like business to business things don't happen like that, because you just pilot it, right? Like UPS pilots it and they just spend like a couple $1 million to try it. And if it doesn't work, they don't scale it out to $1 billion like Lime would, right? They're just smarter about it. So it's going to take forever. Like, again, I think we're 10 years away. But it'll happen. And if it doesn't happen in the US because of regulations, it'll happen in other countries because someone will want that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit just about like the current market. Like, you are on the front lines of seeing how the American consumer is behaving, and we're heading into Christmas in 3 days. Like, what are you seeing right now as it relates maybe to where we were a year ago, or just in general, like any high level thoughts?
Yeah, but spending's up. Spending this year was earlier, so I think that also threw people off. So November was way better than people thought. December's moderated a bit. So I think that's just consumers just maybe learning to buy earlier, or people running sales earlier. I don't know. So I think there was somewhat of just a pull forward in demand. But we're not falling off a cliff. I think, we've seen, again, let's go back to Amazon as an example. They really locked down a lot of capacity. They shut people off from being able to send in product in Q4 because more product hit their docks than they expected. They had announced that they were subleasing space and firing people in Q3. And then in Q4, they said, we don't have enough space. We're not allowing you to send stuff in, right? How's that possible? Is that Q3 looked bad. Like, Q3 was heading south. Everyone started to cut. Everyone was focused on how do we deal with the down year. Q4 turned out to be an up year. It's not a up 25% year. It's not like some gangbusters year, but if we're up, I don't know, whatever we'll end up, 8-10%, even if it's a little lower than that, if it's 6 or 8%, that's still a pretty good year considering like what the Fed's been doing, and just sort of like it looked like it was going to be way worse. So it's going to be it's an okay season. It's an up season. I'm optimistic. I always feel like it's really hard to crush the US consumer. Like, we keep buying stuff. Like, maybe we're not going to keep growing as fast, but like the idea of like, hey, the US consumer is going to slow down and spend less. I don't know, it just doesn't seem there. It seems like if it's a recession, it's a really, really, mild consumer recession. Maybe more of a business recession, but consumers, they're still buying.
Is there any cracks in e-commerce in general? Like for a lot of companies, there's been talk maybe the cost to acquire customers too high, like they're not actually as profitable as they thought they were, and that brick and mortar actually serves a much bigger need in society. Like when you kind of hear those kind of, key statements made, like how do you think about that?
I mean, cost per acquisition did just go up. Like Apple did change the rules. Like there's a reason like Meta stock dropped, and like they just made it harder to target customers. So that did destroy a lot, or it took a lot of marginal businesses and made them unprofitable, and it took a lot of decent businesses and made them more marginal. Like it did just whack the industry. A couple other things is, hey, there was a lot of free money floating around. So consumers buy now, pay later. I think that's the biggest risk. That's the one thing I'm worried about. I'm pretty optimistic overall, but I'm a little worried about post-Christmas. If people are going to have no money because they've tapped out their credit cards and all their buy now, pay laters are due, and there's no more debt, right? Like when the debt stops, like if they were living off debt, then they got to stop spending entirely, right? Not only do they not have the debt, they don't have the money because they're paying the debt, right? Or they're not paying the debt. So I think there's some of that is affecting e-commerce, right? Consumers a little tighter on money, so a little harder to get that dollar from them. But also the e-commerce businesses were taking these loans from 4 different places, right? There's a lot of companies providing debt to e-commerce businesses. And they've been pulling back. So they're not providing that much debt, right? So even good businesses, right? That's just the way it works. When lenders pull back, they basically pull back broadly because they can't really evaluate all these small borrowers, right? So they just pull back entirely. So there's a little bit less debt. So there was some companies that, were growing, but were never really profitable. But if you're growing and you could get debt, that trap, right? You're growing and you get debt, you grow, you get debt, and then one day there's no more debt, and you're like, oh shit, I don't actually have a business here, right? I was just 100% leveraged. So some of that, some people get squeezed there, but I think overall, like the good businesses will be fine, and you also have like the Pelotons of the world and some other people that just had these like crazy valuations based on COVID spending that were just never realistic, and they just crash back, or Carvana or whatever, they're just crashing back to earth. But they probably should never have had the valuations they had.
Yeah. I was at a YPO, like the global real estate conference recently, and a panelist said something that I've kind of heard in different ways. And they were talking about Amazon and all the innovation going on inside the warehouse. And, one thing that I like about the industrial space is there's so much investment going into how do you get more product through the warehouse. And they just made a case. Now we'll see or not, but they just said 10 years from now, you could see some industrial rents as high as $50 a foot, because the throughput through these buildings is just going to get so great that the margins that they're able to achieve out of each building are huge, and $50 a foot isn't going to, phase them. Now, whether that happens or not, let's just say in most markets, you're at an average of like $8 to $12. I mean, that's a big statement to say there's 50. So I guess my question would be, as you think about like, what are the leading things that could make a warehouse that much more efficient? Is it all robotics? Like, how could you possibly get there? Is it mezzanine levels within a warehouse? Like if I was to say, I want to charge $50 a foot, and in 10 years, I need a tenant that could pay that. How are they going to get there?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is going to have to be regulation, not allowing people to build more. Like it's Canadian dollars, but in Vancouver, it's over $25 at this point because you can't build. So, so that would have to be part of it, right? Because if you could keep building, people still throw up buildings and drive that price down. There's some places of the warehouse that have been getting way more efficient, but other square footage where you really can't. So the way basically most warehouses look is half the building is very narrow aisle pallet racking up to the ceiling. And it's hard to imagine getting more dense than that. So you have an aisle. The aisle has a wire guide on it. You have a turret truck that drives between it. There's only about 4 or 5 inches of clearance on either side of that. And then you have pallet racks all the way up to the ceiling. So I don't know how you get more dense in that sort of overstock area. In the pickable areas, and that's where you keep your overstock, right? So you get in 10,000 units, 9,000 go there, 1,000 go in the pickable areas. The pickable areas have been getting more dense and will continue to get more dense due to robotics, but that's only about half the building, or a little bit less than half the building that's that. So I don't see how you can squeeze any more density out of the overstock areas, because those very narrow aisle pallet racks they're full of stock. Like, I'm not really sure how you would get that any higher. Throughput's going up, but the actual throughput's going up, but the storage is hard to make denser.
Yep. Okay. Some might say that globalization is, I don't know if the word's over, but it's on its way back to not being a globalized world. That has, if the average American didn't know what a supply chain was 3 years ago, I think every American has heard the word supply chain over and over and over. Again, you've been at the center of it. Like, let's talk about onshoring. Let's just talk about a little bit about what you're seeing. Like, how is the world reorienting itself? And from your view of the world, like, what are you expecting to see? The good, the bad, the ugly?
Yeah, we've discussed this a little bit. It's hard to move supply chains. People, if you want to track how many people say they're going to move their supply chains, it's a lot. If you want to track how many people are actually moving their supply chains, it's pretty low. I forget the exact numbers. I looked it up the other day. But over the last few years, since the Trump tariffs, which we thought were going to decimate imports from China, the growth in imports from China have exceeded, and I got to look up these numbers, got to be slightly off, but have exceeded all our imports from Mexico. They've grown more than the entire imports from Mexico, and the imports from Mexico have barely grown. You're talking, 10% a year sort of growth, like super slow compared to the narrative of like, oh my God, we're onshoring, we're moving, or we're nearshoring, we're moving everything close. It's just not happening. I was fortunate enough to speak to Noel Rubini not the other day, it was a few months ago at this point, about this, and he was saying, hey, it's going to be not nearshoring, but it's going to be friendshoring, where what the government's going to do is say or exert pressure to make it such that maybe it's not Mexico, but it's also not China, because we don't like China. So we're going to be importing more from India or from other places that are more aligned with the US. So that was his idea. But to do that requires a pretty heavy-handed government influence, right? 25% tariff wasn't enough. So how much pressure are they going to exert? They could do it, right? They can make it so that importing from China is so unpleasant that you're going to go find other sources. But outside of some really heavy-handed government intervention, importing from China is still the default, not because it's the cheapest, but they know how to manufacture, the supply chains exist, the value chains exist, and to break those into pieces is really hard, because I'll just give you an example. So we import our martial arts uniforms from Pakistan. If you walk around the block where my factory is, right next door to it is another factory that also makes a similar product, and next door to it is another one, next door to another one. The entire row of that area is all making a similar product, and right there's someone whose full-time job is fixing his business is fixing the equipment when it breaks for those factories. So when something breaks, he's there. I have a friend who opened the factory making the same product in Maine. Wonderful business person, really devoted American, and he's doing his thing because it's really important to him. When his piece of equipment breaks, instead of someone showing up in 20 minutes, he pays someone to fly to Maine. He's down for a day or two, right? And then he's got a huge cost, right? So instead of costing him, $80 to get it fixed, it's costing him several $1,000s, and he's down for a day because there's no infrastructure, there's no ecosystem there. Same thing for importing the materials. He still has to import the materials from Pakistan because that's where the factory that makes the materials are, right? Because there's not enough of a supply chain in Maine. So moving these things over just requires an incredible amount of hard work and caring about it. Like I think it's Rogue Fitness. There's some people that really care about Made in America, and that's like they're devoting their business life to making this business happen, and then you can make it happen. But if your idea is, hey, I'm going to save $20 by moving my product to Mexico, or I'll have a little better supply chain or whatever. If you're not willing to be putting in like 80 hours a week and making it happen, it's just never going to happen because it's way too hard a challenge. And for most businesses, it's just not worth it. Like just source it from China and it costs you 5% more, and whatever, you move on with your life, get back to sales and marketing, which generates a lot bigger lift than the 5%.
Is there any incentive that you could see the government offering that would make it to where there is a rush, or is it literally just the time and complexity and labor and decision making that even if the incentive was made, it would still take a decade to actually see a dent in the supply chains?
Oh yeah, there's no way to do it in less than a decade, and I'm skeptical it'll even happen over a decade because it takes a decade of hard work. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic in general, but on this case, like I've just seen so many people try, and we've tried to move stuff over, and people won't pay $1 more for Made in America, no matter what they say, they won't. So you got to figure out how to do it, compete with your competitors who are not making in America. You have to compete with people that say they're making in America and are not. Very, very common situation. You see it all the time. People import product and rebrand it, and they just say Made in America. There was a recent criminal filing or lawsuit about it, but I've seen it happen so many times. And those are your competitors, right? So you can't really compete based on Made in America. It has to, you have to be able to win on cost, and the pieces are really hard. So I think if the government pushed, they can make it happen over a decade. I don't think they're going to push hard enough. I think it's not the end of the world importing our t-shirts from, whether it's China or another Southeast Asian country. Like, does it really matter? I know the government cares a lot if it's China or Vietnam. They'd much rather you be importing from Vietnam, but I'm not sure it matters that much.
So maybe that leads to my next point. If you were reading headlines, you would say like they've peaked and manufacturing's heading outside of China. And, Apple just announced they're moving to I think somewhere in Phoenix and Vietnam. Like, what is really going on in China from like the pure data, what you're seeing? Is it business as usual over there, or is there a meaningful shift, call it globally, for folks trying to move their businesses out of China?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at like the data from Flexport or FreightWaves, the share of imports from China continues to stay flat or go up. It's not going down. So we as Americans buy more every year. So there's opportunity for a lot of growth outside of China without China going down. We just buy so much stuff. But China is still dominant, and it's always been a globalized world. It's never been just China, right? Like we've been importing products from the other Southeast Asian countries for years, right? Like Korea is a huge manufacturing company and country. So it's never been just China. And what people don't, and the other thing that I think, the other misconception is people who have this like narrow world of this China-based, China as the world's manufacturer should just Google how much product the US creates and how much we export. We're actually the second largest exporter after China. We export a ton of stuff. We do make a ton of stuff. So it's not a Chinese-led world, but China's place as the number one exporter in the world is not changing this decade.
Have the COVID lockdowns had as big of an impact as we think, or like you just said, imports are still up, so it can't be that big of an impact?
Yeah, imports are still up. Were there disruptions? Tons. It was super painful and annoying, but the total export amounts never took that big a hit. The product, ports were closed, created huge backlogs, but we had one point there was like 45-day backlogs, but it all worked its way through, and there's no backlogs anymore.
Yeah, that was my next question. Any current inflation cannot now be pointed towards a backlog of over-ordered product, or is that still working its way through the system?
No, we're past that. I mean, I've been yelling that we're going to get deflation for too long. Not deflation, but disinflation. I don't know what the term is.
Yeah.
But inflation is going to go back down to normal. For too long, I was early on that call for sure, so I was wrong. But the cost to manufacture goods in U.S. dollars has been dropping. Import prices are dropping. Diesel is dropping, and regular gasoline has been dropping. It's actually down a lot. Diesel was the last one that was stubborn, and it's finally been coming down pretty significantly over the last month. So any supply chain fuel related stuff that I think was the heat on the fire for inflation's all over. So now I think it's still working its way through our system, but I think it's mostly just its wages at this point that are driving all of inflation.
And I guess from your point of the world, is it only Amazon that can afford the robots, or are robots going to make their way into smaller businesses? Like, is it an affordability thing, how much these machines cost? I have no idea how much these machines cost, or are we going to start seeing more and more of these in the warehouse no matter what type of business you run?
Oh yeah, they're all over the place already. It's been following a great innovation curve where we work with a company in Via Robotics. So I met their CEO at our facility in Jacksonville, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago at this point. They make the robots for dirt cheap. There's a lot of precision that you no longer need to include in the robots that you had to 10 years ago, because they adjust with AI-based adjustments just like a human. So in the past, where a robot had to be perfect because it was programmed to do exactly something, nowadays robots are way more like humans. Humans are super imperfect, right? When you go to grab something, you don't know what you're going to grab exactly, right? I couldn't tell you how to grab something exactly, except as I'm watching it, I adjust, right? So even though I'm very imprecise as a robot, I just constantly keep adjusting. So as the software's gotten better, they now can build robots that are pretty imprecise and still very, very functional, because they keep just adjusting just like a person does. So the cost of a warehouse robot in terms of hardware is probably down to the sub $25,000 and continuing to drop really rapidly. So costs are coming down. The reason why they're not in more facilities is there's still complexities with rolling them out and integrating with your other systems and all those other bits. But it's not that they're going to happen. They're happening today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as we kind of wrap up this year, and it's kind of where we started the conversation, but maybe there could be some final thoughts on like leading indicators to where we're going next year. Is there like anything that is kind of top of mind for you in 2023 besides business as usual? Like any interesting data points that you're seeing that kind of have you thinking about where the world is headed? Well,
so I think no one knows what the consumer is going to do, but I think it's going to be somewhere, in the middle. Like it's not going to be 2008, and it's not going to be, boom times either, right? We'll muddle along. I think the more interesting question is capital markets, pricing assets. I think, no matter what people say publicly, the reality is if you're sort of at our scale, we're over $100 million a year company. We've raised over $50 million in our round. At that scale, there's very few new investors that are coming into companies and writing checks. Everyone's afraid to buy at the wrong price, right? So I think it's underreported how locked up the late stage growth equity, private equity markets are, because everyone's living in fear of looking stupid. No one wants to write that big check and find out, man, I overpaid. So that's why we're in this weird world where you're seeing the unemployment numbers today were great, right? We have low unemployment and tons of layoffs in tech. Like that's never happened before. Usually tech, like engineers are the last people to get fired, right? But that's changing because no one's getting new venture dollars and no one knows what price stocks will be. No one knows what the correct value is for a tech company these days. So everyone's operating in an environment where you don't know where your next dollar is going to come. And as you know, if you can't price assets, it's just nothing moves. Like everything freezes up. You can't sell companies. No one really wants to do anything. So there's this like a little bit of a gridlock in tech. And I suspect it's also a little bit broader than just tech, like just pricing assets in general. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Or like you seeing people just afraid to commit?
Oh yeah. I mean, the real estate markets they're just pretty much shut off. I mean, we have a little bit more of a benefit of being able to have, a lot of, real estate has cash flow. I'm not saying tech businesses don't, but a lot of these businesses aren't profitable yet. I feel like real estate has a little bit more of a easy way to value things. But it's still shut off. I mean, interest rates continue to climb. I think everybody decided, in my opinion, just like talking to people, is kind of like everybody got together in summer and just said, let's take the rest of the year off, like almost collectively. And that's pretty much what you've seen. I think there was a lot of talk that, in Q4, you'll start seeing capital flows come back into the market. That really hasn't happened. I saw Jamie Dimon talk the other day in Dallas, and he doesn't have a crystal ball, but he thought the Fed funds rates will top out around 5% sometime in Q1. And that'll bring, at least some more clarity to the market. He thinks they'll hold steady, if not maybe creep a little bit more throughout the rest of the year. But he said, the real estate industry said, I mean, from my view of the world, like Q2 is maybe when you start seeing some activity again, some action, because at least in our industry, but a lot, I'm assuming in your industry with venture, there's apparently $260 billion of committed real estate, domestic funds for real estate already raised. They have a 3-year clock on most of that to deploy it. I don't know how the VC funds work. I'm assuming it's something similar. Either they're not going to deploy the money or they are, and just knowing human behavior, like they'd rather deploy it than not. So we'll see. I mean, leverage in the system tends to be a lot less than it's been, at least compared to '08. But kind of what you said, I think the big thing that is interesting to me, and you said like unemployment remains great, but tech is losing jobs considerably, is like how big of an impact was the tech world having on the entire economy? And, if we're going to lose half of our tech workers and it turns out we didn't need them to begin with, like what is that going to do to, the economy in general? Tech is just, it was like, it's led everything for the last 20 years. And now you're kind of having this reckoning moment where it's like, either A, we didn't need all this tech. A lot of stupid stuff got funded that should have never been funded. B, we don't need half the people that we thought we needed to run these companies. I mean, Twitter's maybe a good example of that. I know it's a different type of business, but that's kind of what I think from an industrial standpoint will be really interesting, is like, how will the tech companies perform, especially that need warehousing and everything in 2023? And that's kind of left to be like, we're kind of figuring that out right now. It's the first time in 20 years anybody's doubted tech. So I kind of started rambling at the end there. But as far as price discovery in real estate, it's weird because I think people know what stuff should be priced at. Nobody's willing to pull the trigger yet. Again, because it's, I think, this conscious decision that everybody's taking the year off, especially lenders who had a great first half of the year. Anyway, that's a long answer. I don't even know if I answered your question, but it's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. I mean, what you're basically saying is everyone's operating from a, like, just better not to swing a miss, right? Better just sit here and just, take a few pitches, right? And just sit on our hands. And I think in real estate, I mean, I guess it depends on if you have to refinance or not, but you're not a cash burning business. So you probably have a little bit more flexibility to just sit and wait versus in tech where most of the businesses are cash burning businesses. So if you don't think enough capital is coming in over a given timeline, you have no choice but to cut, right? And if you don't have visibility into when capital is going to come, you don't have a choice but to cut, right? So that's why we've seen all these huge tech companies, even ones that are very, very well capitalized, cut because they're like, this might take 2 years. And like, I'm going to run out of money in 2 years, so I got to cut today. And I think part of them are also saying like, hey, we were willing to spend $10 to get this unit of growth because our multiple was 50x earnings, right? Now it's like, well, it's actually 5x earnings, so I can only spend $1 instead of $10, right? So just some of those marginal ideas of like, hey, we can grow our company by doing X. It's just like, well, okay, that made sense when the market was high, right? And your stock's down 80%. Like, there's still things to do. You might still have a good business, but like that idea that moved the needle a little is just no longer worth funding, and just you got to cut back. But the one interesting thing about tech is every once in a while you have a massive home run. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out in a couple of years as there's finally talent available, right? For years, you just couldn't really hire any good engineers because they were all working at, Google or Facebook or Apple. Now that there's some are available, it'll be interesting to see if some younger companies get formed, and you can still build a $500 billion tech company if you're the next Google or the next Apple or the next Amazon. So I suspect there'll be some amazing companies formed out of this. I think once that happens, tech will come roaring back. But yeah, it's a weird time.
What do you think happens to like, you might be thinking about this with all this talent on the street, but a lot of these people coming out of these companies, we're making these inflated salaries. I mean, you see some of the numbers, these people making $600,000, $1 million a year salary. They weren't, cush everything. They got Lyft cards and meal cards, and like they're coming back out. One, small businesses can't really afford that as like an individual employee. So that obviously they're going to give stock options to get them, if at all. But I sometimes wonder, like, okay, it's not an overwhelming amount of people. It's not like half the country, but you have a lot of people that are used to making $600,000 to $1 million a year that probably built a lifestyle that supported that. And at least for the next few years, like some of them will get rehired maybe at the same amount, but it seems like there's a lot of people that are going to be like, have a day of reckoning that they're just not worth that to the market, to anybody else but like a Facebook that could, just stomach that. It was a rounding error for them. How do you think about that? What's going to happen to those people?
Yeah, I mean, some individuals are going to be in a lot of pain. Like and the people that are let go, obviously companies try to let go of the people that they actually couldn't get that value out of them, right? So it's not like the best people at Google will still be able to get a job paying $1 million a year, right? But a lot of the people that are let go were not the best people, and they shouldn't have been getting paid $1 million a year. And, they just got sort of wrapped up in that's what that level pays, and they probably shouldn't have been at that level. So, to some degree, people are like, I'm going to cry for someone who's got to go back from making, $600,000 to $250,000, whatever. But also, hey, man, if you got kids in private school and you've got a house somewhere where, your property taxes are, $50,000-$60,000 a year, and it's painful. So like,
yeah, I don't know. I'm never excited for anybody's failure. I think if there's one thing I'm excited about in general about what this next market brings us is it brings a level of work ethic back into the workforce. You have to really be good at what you're doing to exist. It just makes operators the best shine. It doesn't allow a ton of incumbents into the market that just can raise money and kind of go around and, create more kind of chaos than is necessary. I think it hopefully makes people maybe more grateful again for what they have. I don't know. I just think you can kind of feel it. You're seeing it, even the big tech companies. I think Salesforce came out the other day, the CEO, who was like the first person to say, we're going fully remote, work from home. That's the future. And like 2 years later, he makes this huge announcement that we're not as productive. we're slashing our bottom 10%, and we think that the office culture needs to make a resurgence. I'm not saying the office is, could be a hot word, but in general, you've seen that now at Twitter. Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook has kind of said, you're just starting to see a new tone in CEOs' voices, which is like, we're going to get back to like working really hard. And if you're not adding value, you're not going to be here. And I think, a 14-year bull run and a lot of cheap money made things pretty lax.
Yeah. I mean, my personal experience with it was we bootstrapped up to 30 million in annual revenue. So we were profitable and we had raised $435,000 to get there, right? So we did it by making profit. And, we had really hard conversations internally. Because, I owned the company. Some of our employees have options, but, I owned the vast majority of the company. We were profitable. We were big. We're still not growing as fast as we are now. We were still growing 70% a year. Like, it was really solid business. And, we sat down leadership wise and we said, at that point, it's less than now, but like our top 3 competitors had raised like over $250 million combined in the preceding year. And we looked at each other and we're like, we think we're building a great company that'll go public one day. And we think we could win as an underfunded relative to competition. We think we have the right culture, but can we do that on $0 when we're going up against $250 million, right? And we answered no. We honestly don't think we can win with no money to go up against people with that much more money than us. So we went out and we got a single investor that wrote a $50 million check to us, and we jumped on the VC bandwagon or growth equity bandwagon. I don't know that in a perfect world where money was more expensive, if my competitors had raised, a more reasonable amount of money each, they had raised $20 million and I had raised 0. I think I could have fought and continued to win in that environment, but I didn't feel like I could do it when they were raising, $100 million rounds. So I think there's a lot of companies like that'll maybe come more to the fore now that the money has stopped. People that had good fundamentals and weren't as hypey. So I think that's the one good thing. The other maybe good, maybe bad, but certainly painful thing you're going to see is there's more fraud out there. I've spoken to friends about, I'm like, hey, is this company real? And they're like, they've even spoken to people that have invested in those companies, and they're like, I don't know, but like valuation keeps going up. So whatever, I'm not going to ask any questions, right? We've seen some CEO departures, CEOs leaving companies that have raised at $1 billion plus valuation. Usually, there might be some fraud there, right? Something to look at. So not just, the big crypto ones, but some other ones that were just super hypey. So I think some of that'll go. The whole tech industry will be tainted with that for a while, where everyone's going to think all tech is fraud because more fraud is going to come to the fore. But it had to happen. It was too frothy. People got away with way too much stuff, and it needed to wash out. So
yeah, hopefully you mentioned going public. Hopefully you see these companies go public a lot earlier.
It's just too expensive. Like the compliance cost to go public. Like our goal is to go public in the first half of 25. So we're working that plan. I think we'll get there. Not easy. But the economics of going public these days, like it's just the overhead, the cost of not just going public, but being public. Like we still do like, Big Four accounting audits and all that, like a public company would. Which is expensive. We still spend a ton of money on compliance, but going public is even more expensive. I think that's a regulatory mistake that we just made it too hard, just too expensive to go public. It pays to stay private.
Interesting. I didn't realize that that's why a lot of folks were staying private so long, especially in tech. I know it's like a real estate REIT. They usually say, I think it's 2 billion or 5 billion. I need to freshen up on that. It's like the minimum amount of AUM. I think at 2 you can do it, but it's still pretty tight. 5 is where it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, so it's just math. You just look at
and you got to be a public company CEO, which like there's days I'm like I'd rather have a hole in my head than be a public company CEO. But
I just wanted to say I was in your neighborhood a lot this month. We have a warehouse in Fort Worth, so I spent a lot of time in Fort Worth in the last month. Yeah. Terminal Road down near the airport, that little airport.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called, but
over by DFW?
No. There's a little airport in Fort Worth. It's like a little commercial airport. I can't remember what it's called, but it's on Terminal Road in Fort Worth. So we have a warehouse there. So
Meacham. Up north.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, if you are in town anytime, I'd love to host you for lunch or anything. It'd be fun.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the chat. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll be in touch.
Have a good one. Thank you.